confirmed a quorum? Mr. Secretary, thank you. Any comments about the meeting agenda and order? I'm going to ask Flood and Erosion to join us at the table when we get to the issue related to landscaping and clear any issues. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, if possible, we do have our landscape architect here tonight, so if possible, if we could discuss that issue first and let him be on his way.
Okay. Yeah, we could move that up if there are no objections from the committee.
Yeah, you want to take care of the minutes first? And then
Yeah, I will, yep. So what we'll do then is we'll take the item 8, presentation, discussion, and approval of the proposed landscaping scope and cost. We'll move that up to item 5. That said, I'd entertain a motion to approve, waive reading, and approve the meeting minutes from 7/28/16.
I'll make that motion.
Motion made, seconded. Any comments, additions, edits? That said, all in favor of approving the minutes? Aye. Against? Abstain?
Steve abstained. Abstain.
2 absent?
Yeah.
2. That said, we're going to go to, we have 2 action items on tonight's agenda. One is a presentation of the landscaping, possibility of expanded landscaping, since we've been monitoring our contingency and we might have funds available. We've got to be very careful about this. And the second one is the request by the town to upgrade the fire alarm system. So let's go into the landscaping as long as you're here. And you want to take us through it, Kevin? The idea here is that the committee cut back on the landscaping budget for a $30,000 allowance, and with the idea that as the project progressed, if monies were available in the budget, we might expand that landscaping scope. So Kevin, you want to take us through it, what the baseline is and what suggestions are being made, or does Shawmut want to do it, or you both want to do it?
Well, I'll start.
All right.
So, as the chairman said, the current project, the GMP, includes just a cash allowance of $30,000 for landscaping. However, the project wishes to spend it. Because we don't have an exact crystal ball with costs when we're designing the project, we decided to break out the landscaping into 4 different areas that could be priced separately by the landscape bidders, which was what was done. So out of those 4 areas, if we want to do all of them, it's significantly more than $30,000. So we wanted to bring this to the committee's attention for some direction and possibly a vote. Let me describe the 4 areas, and I'll ask Bruce to come up and possibly add to whatever I have to say, maybe more intelligently than I can say it. One area are the 2 new rain gardens that will be built along Fairfield Beach Road. There are some mostly low-lying plants that would go in there to help that system function more effectively and help filter the runoff that comes into the detention basins better. There are a few trees, relatively small trees, such as non-fruiting crab apples and Japanese maples, that were also called out to go in that strip. I believe that was also the result of some input from the tree warden. So that's one area of landscaping that was identified on the plan. Yes?
So Fairfield Avenue is that whole strip is all one zone?
Yeah, that's one. Just excuse me one second. Let me just see what we called that. Okay, that's alternate area L4. So that's the rain gardens. Then, just stand over your shoulder, if I may. Then there were 2 alternates that are the areas in front of the building facing the parking lot. So by front, I mean the parking lot side of the building.
You hold this up, Kevin, so you can see.
So an area that we called L2, which consists of the trees that are in the areas in front of the building. And it's not fully planted out with trees, but there are some trees there to create diversity in the landscape. Yep. And area L3, which is low-lying type shrub plantings in front of the building. So those are 2 additional areas. And then we have a 4th area that at the present time, we don't anticipate pursuing, which was the beach grass plantings on the seaward side of the building. And the reason I say that was because that's a deferred decision pending some further input from the Flood and Erosion Control Board and some further design studies. At the time that this drawing was prepared, we had a bulkhead. We no longer have a bulkhead. So a defined strip of land doesn't necessarily exist the way it used to. So at the present time, as far as the committee's purposes go, what we're talking about are the bioswale / detention basin plantings and the plantings in front of the building. Any questions at this point?
What are the cost estimates for those areas?
Okay, so I will defer to Shawman on the exact numbers, but in addition to the $30,000 that's already in the bid, there's approximately another $47,000, $48,000 that would have to be added to do all 3 areas. Do everything except the beach grasses behind the building.
So it's $77,000 for those areas?
I don't, do we have an exact number, Mark?
Yeah, I have
Okay.
actually a bid package.
So Mark will pass out the, and these are numbers that were actually furnished at the time the project was bid last summer.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mark, just take us through this.
Okay, the primary ones are the 2 bottom numbers. Number 5 are the bioswale plants. That's everything that's along Fairfield Beach Road for the bioswales. And then number 4 is all the plantings up near the building.
So, help us out here. When the project was bid, the GMP, the guaranteed maximum price, included a $30,000 allowance for landscaping.
Correct.
Undefined,
However you want to use it.
$30,000 allowance
Yep.
for landscape.
That's correct.
The bid documents at the time the project was bid has alternate ads that the allowance could be used for, or
That's correct.
netted against. And those alternate ads are 2 through 5? Is there a 1 missing? What, we're looking at 17?
One is an alternate ad to add for payment and performance bond.
Okay.
Okay. Every.
So everything else is here in front of us.
Yep. And as well as unit prices, too. These are the unit prices that were given to us down below.
Right. But for the record, we don't have, this is the definition of landscaping right here, and the
Correct.
cost.
Correct, for the whole package.
That's right.
And then the beach grasses are the 17,500 on the top.
And have you done the math, the net, if the committee chooses to exercise the additional, the alternate ads in the bid documents, is there a net number of, it's 30,000 plus X? What is X?
Well, what was included is 3, 4, and 5. And that was a net add of, I believe, 49K. I gave Colliers the PCO this week
Yeah, that included everything with the exception of the beach grass.
of the beach grasses.
That included everything with their Shawmut markups. It was roughly in the range of $49,000. That included everything but the seagrass or the beach grass.
Well, it can't be roughly, because we just have been talking about a $30,000 allowance, which is carried in the GMP, and alternate ads 3, 4, and 5 are specific. You
What-
want to add alternates 3, 4, and 5, and you want to deduct the $30,000 undefined allowance. What's that number? 47?
It's 47, but they have their markups and general liability to add to that. So that's where we're at 48, we're close to $49,000. Once everything all in.
Well, Steve, do you recognize, you've been working with the contracts in this, do you recognize markup on alternate ads? Steve?
I'm
Oh,
listening.
okay.
Sorry. The number that was presented was $48,704.
48,700?
$704.
Okay.
And that's in addition to the 30. Is that what we're talking about?
It's in addition to the 30. And yes, you would include all applicable markups because it's a change to the GMP, above the 30,000, in my opinion.
Okay. And have you done that? Have you run the numbers on the, and the final number is?
It was right around 49,000.
Yeah.
Well-
It's what I just said. We have the PCO.
Oh, okay, it's as marked up?
As marked up,
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
Sorry. With all the applicable markups, it's the 48,000.
Okay.
Jim, is the 7,500, the trees along the building, number 3?
So that,
Is that what that is?
to my guess, or to my understanding, what they have, number 2 is L1, what Kevin just described. Number 3 is L2, what Kevin just described. 4, L3, 5 is L4.
Okay.
So 5 is the area along so 3 and 4 is the same zone. You're just talking about high plant, trees versus all the low planting for an alternate number.
Right, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
From a landscaping perspective, do you want to give us some insight? Is this something this committee should be considering? Does this going to make a significant difference in this building, the way it looks? You have a seat, you can
Sure.
just give quickly, we know you, but...
For the record, Bruce Reinheimer, BHR Landscape Architecture. So, in my opinion, the area directly in front of the building is the primary area that we should be looking at, both trees and shrubs and grasses. We have some low retaining walls that are going in front of there. We're raising the building up, and I think that anything that we can plant in front of the building will help soften that and make it feel like it's more part of the landscape. In addition to that, the areas by the bioswales are important only from the standpoint that we're draining all that water off the parking area is being pitched down toward those swales. So it's an area that will get inundated with water and then dried up. It allows sediment from the parking areas to collect in those areas and be easily maintained and excavated out, probably once or twice a year, depending upon, the sand levels and wind levels and that kind of thing. But it would help in terms of cleansing the storm water that comes off the parking areas. Aesthetically, the areas directly in front of the building and probably on either side of the main entry where you pull in are probably the key visual points that you want to key in on.
Is the landscaping plan that we've been looking at and having the bid documents, does that really show up as landscaping, or is it kind of spotty and sparse, or is it
Okay, so what we did is we planted some fairly decent-sized trees in front of the building, similar to what was there prior. Not quite that large, but they will get up there. That was just to give it some scale and some evergreen quality primarily. We also have a couple of crabapple trees that we were asked by the tree warden to put in there for seasonal interest. So that'll give some scale to the overall building. And then just to get everything seeded down into the ground, we have grasses and shrub masses, really masses of shrubs that will eventually grow together, will knit together. So you'll start reading large masses of grasses or large masses of perennials or ground covers as an understory to these trees, as a foreground actually to the trees.
generally maintenance-free?
Yes, yeah, and they're all, they're plants that are fairly native to seashore conditions. So they should be salt tolerant, they should handle the wind, and the only maintenance issue I would say is maybe like just initially until we get the ground covers to creep and really grow together, there'll be some weeding that will be needed until that happens. Once that happens, it should just create almost a carpet on the ground.
What's the level of the establishment irrigation that's going to be necessary for them? Is it just over the initial month, or is the town
Yeah,
understanding they're going to have to do it for
I
like 9 months?
think once they get established, rooted, we should be good to go. And I don't see any irrigation, needed on a continual basis for these plants. The ones that are up near the building are designed to be in sort of sandy loam soil, so it'll perk fairly fast. And they like sun, so shouldn't be an issue down there. The ones out by the parking lot area are kind of the inverse, where you're going to get inundated with water. They have to be able to handle water at periods and then dryness at periods.
But what about actually maintaining them over the first month or two, as far as getting them established?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's in Shawmut's contract or that other landscapers.
Okay, so we had a 1-year growing guarantee on the in the specs. So depending upon whether we plant, in September, October, or we go into the following spring, that would start that period.
Okay.
Further questions from the committee?
I have one, Jim,
Yeah.
if you may. So the bioswales, without any landscaping per this document, do they still operate and function? Do we need the landscaping to have them operate and function the way they were initially designed and for the water runoff?
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so generally speaking, shrubs and grasses will have a deeper root system than just regular grass, if we just grassed over those areas for now. So you do get a little better retention by having the larger plants in there. We could adjust that planting in there if you wanted it to be more open, but the idea was to try to create a little bit of foreground to the parking area there visually, so you weren't looking at all cars from across the street.
Right.
We've been told that the plantings make the bioswale more efficient.
That's true, yeah. Yes. Yep.
The,
So,
as a base bid item, we had the grass, not as a permanent vegetation in the bioswale, but just to get us through until such time as landscaping was installed.
Would you put the grass back in? Would you include the grass if you?
No, I'm saying if we
Is
do
it
the
either or?
landscape scope, we don't need anything else. But if for some reason the cost was prohibitive and the committee didn't elect to do it, we have the grass just to have something in the bioswale.
Steve, keep going. What do you?
No, so because we have $30,000 to spend that's in the GMP. So every penny above that comes out of the contingency. So if we were stuck trying to stay close to $30,000, it looks like we're either doing bioswales or the front of the building.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to
That's
get
why
to.
we're
And
here.
then given the what I understand to be discussion of the pavers versus the bio-retention swales, or whatever we want to call them, I think if we're not going to, I think, right now I'm sitting here with, there's one option for us to do, which is number 5 on this list, which is the bioswales. If in fact we need that landscaping in order to maximize the efficiency and operation of the water retention, or whatever we want to call it, those basins.
Two things that brought this forward, aside from the overall timing on the project. One is planting season, when to plant, when to get this in. And the second thing is, we, by 2 different votes at 2 different meetings, we've committed to the rain gardens in lieu of the pavers. And so, you're correct. This is the time to make a decision.
And then the only question I had is if in fact we don't do anything in the front of the building, what do we end up with? If we don't do any of the landscaping plans shown here in 3 and 4, what's the finished product? Is it just earth?
I would strongly recommend that you consider the plantings in front of the building
Yeah.
even before the bioswale. Just
They're gonna-
visually.
that would be our-
You're
that
not
would be
going to
your
be real
priority.
happy with the building without any planting in front of it.
Right.
That would be my opinion.
To answer your question, though, we do have a base bid line item, which is just grass the area. So we own grass in front of the building if nothing else is planted there.
Then it just becomes a ditch. That's what the bio.
No, in front of the building.
In front of the building,
in front of the
between the retaining walls and the building.
That's part of the $30,000 though, correct? Right, Mark?
I would.
Well,
have
no,
to-
we said it was undefined, it was an undefined allowance, so
Landscaping package is $30,000 allowance for anything. The grass is not included.
So even if we just do grass and topsoil, it comes out of the 30. Okay. Okay.
I'm not sure I get all that.
Wasn't there, at one of the meetings, the depth of the topsoil, that's something that had to be adjusted?
The topsoil near the building is 2 feet, shown on the drawings, but that's still irrelevant that the landscaping package is still $30,000. That includes whatever is needed. I mean, the drawings show a labyrinth of $80,000 worth of plantings, but that's not what is being built. What we have is $30,000 of an allowance. So what the drawings show is kind of misconstruing people to think that, hey, we have topsoil here. We strictly have a $30,000 allowance for any landscaping.
Then doesn't that raise the question that if we didn't agree to do any 3, 4, and 5, does $30,000 cover me for topsoil and grass?
I would make that assumption, yeah.
So the
Have to talk to
project
my
was bid
landscaper.
without any landscaping, even grass?
It was bid as a $30,000 allowance.
Okay.
I don't know if we can assume, I think we have to look at those. I mean, again, we're into the contingency argument again, or not discussion, and
Right. We don't have arguments.
that's why I corrected, I apologize.
Jim, I've always been consistent throughout the whole process about spending money above what's in the plan. At our committee meeting on Wednesday morning, I was led to believe that the urgency of making this decision was the fact that the window of opportunity of planting season will close. Because, as I said, my concern is that we're not going to use the pavilion this fall, or this winter. Wouldn't it make more sense when we're all done and we know what extra money is available, if we put these things in March or April, or something like that? Now, I was led to believe, though, that if that was the case, we'd have to hire Shawmut to come back after the end of the year, and they would charge us for going in after the contract was over. So again, my initial reaction is to hold off on not spending any of that money now, other than $30,000, but I was led to believe that it'll be more costly to wait till the spring. I want to make sure that that's factually correct.
It sounds, go ahead.
At the moment, we have prices that were competitively bid, even though I don't know that we had that many landscape bidders, but they were on the open market, they were bid. If those go out the window and you go back out to market, yeah, it's quite conceivable that it will cost more. Plus, we lose the opportunity to have this folded into our project and get it done before the project is completed.
From a purchasing perspective, does a contractor under these circumstances of a significant delay in the installation of their materials, do they have any options?
I mean, they don't have to honor that bid, they're honoring it. If we were to go back out, we could look at the market value now, but I can't say, to be
Okay.
honest. It's good that they're honoring the price from over a year ago.
Right. Okay. Okay.
It's my understanding from, at one of the meetings where the landscape contractor indicated that he would hold the price, whether it was done now or in the spring.
No, he held his price for the extension of the GMP. We were supposed to start, but obviously, I think it was started in March, we were supposed to start in October sometime, roughly, and then I had all the subcontractors either agree to hold their bid, or there were 2 contractors that increased their bid to be able to hold the bid.
We had a project meeting over the past 2 or 3 weeks, and the question came up about a fall or a spring planting. What was his answer? Do you remember?
Broach spring planting.
I don't remember him saying that he would
didn't?
hold it through to the spring. I know, like Mark said, I know that all the subs held their prices
Right.
longer than the original
Right.
bid period.
See,
But
Okay.
I think that's all that was mentioned.
When is
I know
our...
he said that all the plants that was asked for, he could get. I remember
Yes.
him say that, and I would have sworn he said that he would all right. You know,
Well, in other words,
that's my
if-
recollection.
If the landscaping proceeds, like, let's say, the September, based on an authorization to go ahead or whatever, he can get those plants now, if the committee takes action, well, basically tonight, I think, right?
I called him today on that as well, and he said that 2 more weeks would be the cutoff time to be able to procure those plants.
When is the planting window for this material?
I think we had in the specs up till, I think it was October 15th or October 30th.
Okay.
So generally, it depends on the year. Some years we have a warm weather. I mean, we're planting into December. Basically, those plants are going to lay dormant until spring.
Right.
We're going to plant them. They're going to be in the ground. They're not going to do anything. They're going to sit there until spring, and then they'll, spark when the weather gets warmer.
Right.
And then if it doesn't happen this fall, then you're probably looking at late April as a start date, up until June 15th as an end date. I'm just trying to think if there was anything in there that could be, no, that would be about right.
Does your scope of services include supervising this planting?
I have a line item in my
You have some construction
proposal.
phase services,
Yeah.
enough to select the plants with the
Yeah, I
landscaper?
think, there's some money in there to.
I mean,
do-
supervision and selection, obviously, critically important, supervision important. We don't ordinarily do this, but I know we have some comments from flood and erosion about the grasses on the other side. I don't know how much you're up to date with what they're doing, but you want to come forward and just, Dick, and give us some insight?
Okay.
You can sit right there, because we're going to be talking about it.
I'm Dick Mahusky, and I'm on the Flood and Erosion Control Board. Basically, Kevin gave you the thumbnail description that my message to the committee tonight is that you should just put the beach grasses on the water side. You should just put that on hold, because between engineering and flood and erosion, we had a meeting back. It's like May now, and we decided that we need to figure out how to come up with the most robust replacement for the removed fortified timber bulkhead that we can, in order to keep the erosion of the 12-foot elevation sand at bay for the most severe storm we can. So there will be a bid request going out shortly to the community to get proposals on designing that. And that project would, of necessity, include the vegetation on the top of that surface. So that was my only message.
Okay, great. Just
refers
don't
to
go
the
away.
shore side.
That's that line item 2? 17,500?
It's L1 on the landscaping
Correct.
plan, the American beach grass.
Yeah.
That's correct.
That's the only landscaping item that's
What's the
affected by
probability that
what we're
that'll
doing.
come to fruition, that it'll get done and,
I hope it's 102%.
right?
I
You have anything to add, Kevin? You've got that look like,
I hope it's 103%. I don't know. No, I don't think that one hinges on the other.
No, they are separate. Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't impact our project.
The landscaping on the shore side of the project is independent from
Yeah.
whatever we do at the water side.
okay. From a landscaping perspective, we always hear success and failure with beach grass or wetlands restorations and so forth. Can you do beach grass restoration, or can you do beach grass planting successfully?
So the beach grass, part of the problems that people have with the beach grass is when they plant it and whether they use plugs or not. So if you're using plugs and you're planting in the time frame in the like November to April time frame, which is the recommended time, you water it, you fertilize it properly, and you space it fairly tightly, which we're spacing at 12 inches on center. You should get good results with that. The thing that, that helps the beach grass to get established is actually wind-blown sand. So in addition to the beach grass, usually you put up a temporary snow fence, which helps to actually move that sand across and sort of pile it along the base of the plants. That's been my understanding.
How does it repopulate or populate itself? Is it a running root system, or?
You know, I'm not even sure on that, to be honest with you. It comes as plugs,
Right.
and they split those rhizomes apart when they're
But 2 or
growing
3
it.
years later, will it be more, my question would be 2 or 3 years later, would it be more dense?
I'm thinking it'd be less, only from the standpoint that you're going to lose a few, you know, in that mix. But overall, it's going to appear to be a dense grass planting. And you can see that as you walk down the beach a little further on down. You can get an idea of how that grows.
But it does fill in.
Oh, yeah.
Good,
Yeah.
hardy.
Jim, I would invite this committee to walk on Fairfield Beach Road. Fairfield Beach Association every year gives away free beach grass, and to homeowners who have a vested interest in making it good. To your point on fertilizing, and I've lived there for 5 years, I've planted beach grass for 5 years, and by the time the kids get through trampling on it, which you're going to find,
right.
and the fact it doesn't grow, and it doesn't populate and hasn't, I think beach grass is not the way to go. You can make a decision what's good, but I would be reluctant to vote for beach grass.
Yeah, I mean, beach grass is, if left, like, untouched, it's perfect. As soon as it gets, like, one little foot sort of on it,
Right. Oh,
and
yeah.
anything, I mean, a beach grass is something that
Unless
town
it's
does it.
really
They have to come
well-established.
in year after year and fill in the gaps and fill
That's
in the
why
gaps
you
and
see
irrigate it.
the snow fencing along
Yeah.
the borders of those areas, is
Yeah.
to, you know, protect from people walking through there.
Yeah.
Well, it was required on a project in Fairfield, not far away from Sasko Beach, as part of a conservation approval of a project. And it was really done right, and it's a very heavy, lush bed of beach grass now on two sides, on the top of the crest of the beach, similar to what we're doing.
This is down at Sasko?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but it has signs about keep off, and it had for a while white stakes with a line going around it, so it did keep people generally off it, but it was successful.
And that's why we had, in the areas where you step down off the deck areas, it actually extends that decking through the beach grass area to, you know, so that people would not walk
Right,
on the
right.
beach grass, but they'd be
Right.
walking on a deck.
Right. All set for you? I mean, as far as the message you wanted to give us?
Yes,
Great. Thank you
yes.
very much, and thank you very much.
Sure.
By the way, anything you want to do before 7:15? You're happy to go through the... Yeah, okay, great. So the proposal before us is, before we get to that point, do we have a net standing owners contingency number?
Currently, as of today, what's available in contingency is $293,100.
292,100?
$293,100.
193,100? From the perspective of the construction manager, when we get to this discussion, we hear a little bit about risk in the startup of the HVAC units on the roof. We know we have a building that came back level. Hopefully, it'll move back level. What's your appraisal of risk going forward and your contingency and owner's contingency?
Well, we'll certainly have a better handle once we fire up all the mechanical units, as you said. That's going to be everything. If, you know, obviously buying new rooftop units would be a major hit to owner contingency if we had to get new rooftop units. But that being said, I'll pass out our construction contingency, what we've used so far.
All right, that'd be helpful. Again, the CM's construction contingency is theirs, but also offers a buffer for ours in a way, indirectly. Just speak to it briefly.
Okay, so the $270,544 number at the top is what we originally started with. That was our GMP construction contingency. Everything that we've used so far is listed, and it says what it is, and then I just kept a running total on the right, and now we're down to 260,091.
What would your opinion be about the level of progress to date? Are we 50% complete, 60% complete? Where do you think we are?
50.
So at 50% complete between the two contingencies, we have a balance of 553,000, roughly. Okay. One of the reasons this agenda item appears, as I mentioned earlier, is the planting season and our commitment as far as making this building as attractive as possible for Fairfield and the Fairfield Beach area residents. So I'd like to hear from any committee members we want to. I mean, I think that we are far enough down the road on this to discuss a vote and approval of $48,704, which would plant out the two bioswales, which would be both making them more efficient and more attractive for the project, and also the front of the building with the trees and the rest of the shrubs. It's hard to choose between the two, and keeping in mind just one other issue, that is, we will be discussing tonight, whether we vote on it or not, this fire alarm upgrade. Kevin, I think you probably had the most information on that. I don't think we want it right at this minute, but that could be deferred a little bit longer. Yes? No?
If you want, you could table this and we could talk about the fire alarm, and then you could come back to the landscaping.
All right, well, let's see what the committee, anyway, let's go around just to get a kind of an initial feel on whether or not we want to, we're in the position, we said we'd be here, we said we'd hope we'd be here, we're in a positive position to make a decision. Ellery, you want to start us off, and we'll go a quick round?
Yeah, I'm very concerned about the contingency. We really don't know what the building's going to show once it's moved. That could be a big number, so I'm a little gun-shy about spending all this money. But by the same token, I think that if we're going to show a product that's going to be pretty much finished by when? Before the winter? Is that when it's supposed to be finished?
Yeah.
I would vote just to do number 4.
Okay, Steve?
I mean, I like to do all of it, but my other concern is when you look at our contingency right now, I've always been concerned about the rooftop equipment, and given the fact that we have the fire alarm thing to talk about, which is estimated at roughly the same price, and so I'm concerned about approving $50,000 for this, or roughly for the time being. The other thing I do want to note is that the construction contingency and the owner's contingency are two different buckets. And the fact is, this contract has a sharing provision with Shawmut at the end of the day with contingency. So I don't believe we'd have to talk to Shawmut about using construction contingency for owner-related changes. So I don't think we can add the two together and assume we. What's that?
Yet, yeah.
I don't think you can, ever.
So you're saying that the share of the saving provision keeps our hands off the...
To a limit. So the contract says at the end of the contract, 25% of the remaining construction contingency stays with Shawmut to a maximum of $90,000.
Okay.
So I think we would be hard-pressed in spending our contingency with the hopes that Shawmut hasn't spent its, that we get to use that for owner-related changes. I just caution the committee on that.
Okay. Andy?
I think I probably agree with Ellery and Steve on this. I'm originally I would prefer to authorize the full, 3, 4, and 5 build out. I think we're underestimating the lack of landscaping, the visual effect is going to have on the project if we opt to not do it, and that there are going to be additional cost impacts if we choose to do it in the springtime, to bring Shawmut or another landscape contractor back on the job and have to do it. It's a risk that we're taking. But that being said, I think it's a greater risk until we know about the contingency with the final building placement and the mechanical startup and whatever hit we may take from the fire alarm upgrade to go forward with this. So I'm not sure. I would not be in favor of necessarily holding a vote, at least until after we figure out what's going on with the fire alarm, to know what we're working against with the $230,000.
Okay.
290.
Rich?
I would pretty much line up with everybody, what they've just said as well. I'm very concerned about the mechanicals. If the mechanicals were in, I would have no compunction about approving this, but since they're not, and we do have this $50,000 fire problem to take care of, I would say just to do Area 4.
Comment?
If I had to vote today, I'd vote no. I don't believe between now and the spring, the price of plantings are going to go up significantly. And I would just as soon not pay any of the contingencies, and to assure, I would be willing to vote for the $30,000. I would vote no against any additional expenditures above the 30.
30's already there, but, yeah. So, Kevin,
One additional comment.
yeah, please.
Is there a possibility that this work could be done by the DPW in the spring?
I haven't asked that specific question to DPW, but presumably the town could do this as a separate project. There's no reason that it would have to be done as part of this project. I believe, and I'll let you guys answer this, the $30,000 could just be backed out of the GMP.
Okay. Now that we have kind of a general floor under this discussion, tell us a little bit about this fire alarm system that we're now hearing about, which is a late and breaking issue for the committee.
Okay. So the existing building has a fire alarm system that was installed in 2 stages because the building was built in 2 stages. It's a Notifier brand. That's the brand of panel and equipment that's used. At the time the hurricanes hit, the system was completely operational and functional. None of the components, to our knowledge, have gotten wet or damaged, but the system's been shut off for 4 years. As part of the GMP, Shawmut and the electrical contractor will be going through and repairing, testing, replacing anything that needs to get replaced if it doesn't work. Extending the system into the east wing that was demolished and reconstructed, and having the system recertified, inspected, and approved by the fire marshal's office. All of that is owned by the project and is in the GMP. The only thing that wouldn't be covered was if there's components that are damaged that weren't obvious they were damaged and have to be replaced. There are some allowances already in the GMP that could cover that. So why are we discussing this? The reason we're discussing this is there's, on the procurement side, every year the town has to get maintenance contracts for all the town buildings that have fire alarm systems. There's a facilities manager for the town who's relatively new with the town. And his concern is that there's some compatibility from building to building to building, and also that they have the biggest pool of bidders to service the fire alarm system. So his feeling was that the notifier system confines him to too few bidders to service the system. And his thought was, well, if you're replacing part of the system and extending it into the east wing anyway, can you just replace the whole system with something that's more non-proprietary? That's the whole reason we're investigating this.
What does it, excuse me, Kim, what is the scope of this, what is the scope of this proposal and the dollars?
So the scope is basically all the, the panel, the devices, pull stations, strobes, horns, detectors would all be replaced, and a lot of the wiring would have to be replaced as well. So I think we have at this point not an exact cost, but a rough order magnitude cost.
Is that 30,000 rough order magnitude from our subcontractor. That didn't include new design costs,
Right.
and that doesn't include our markups. And the majority of the building is drop ceilings, where I think we can feed everything without having to open up many walls, but we'd have to do, thorough research on if any walls had to be opened up in the kitchen or anything.
So
Don't believe so, but.
So we would be starting with a raw subcontractor price of about 30. We have approximately 4,000 in design costs from the electrical engineer and an incidental amount of time from my office, some cutting and patching of walls, as well as all the usual markups that go with a change order. So you're probably looking at between 40 and 50,000. So what I hope tonight is that we just get the committee's general preference. What way do you want us to go? Do you want us to keep looking into this, or just stick with what we have, which is a perfectly functional, recertified notifier fire alarm system that will add nothing to the cost for the project?
You have a risk scenario here, though. You've got a brand-new building which is partially occupied. In other words, there are times when it's a wood frame building, partially occupied. It doesn't have a constant monitoring of people going in and out at all the time.
Yes.
And it is a place of public assembly. So it puts a little higher burden on the fact that if it were a salt shed somewhere, or an administrative building, or an engineering building, or some other school, maybe you would want to hold it to a school standard. So I think the first question that comes to my mind when I first heard about that is how good is the system? In other words, is this between a $30,000 and a $50,000 expense to really put in a top-notch security and fire alarm system, or is this a 30 or 50,000 that will make this, to finish this project off and we can deliver it as the best, or is it $30,000 or $50,000, which is a nice to have?
Honest, my opinion is that it's a nice to have. The system that's there is a perfectly adequate modern fire alarm system that's less than 10 years old. It would be replaced with a similar modern fire alarm system, not necessarily an extravagantly better system, just a different brand that would have a bigger pool of service contractors.
Okay, thank you.
It's really what it comes down to.
Any questions from the committee on this proposal, which is kind of, it's been introduced on this tonight just to give us some balance about claims on, or
And just
requests
to
for
throw
claims.
one more curveball, unfortunately, we are against a time crunch on this as well, because once the building goes back, they're going to have to start wiring the new system, and
we get it.
we have to pull the trigger one way
We
or
get it.
another.
Did anybody have discussions with the town on the order of magnitude on the net cost differential with utilizing this proprietary system that we have currently in the project design with regards to their service contracts and having a unified type of system town-wide? Are we talking that there's a projected service cost increase of $500,000? Is it very minimal that we're talking about? Is there
Honestly,
any sort of
I
feedback?
don't know. I didn't ask the question, but also nobody gave me any kind of data on it. So I really don't know if we're talking about a big dollar item or a small dollar item. Maybe Corinne can chime in if she knows what the service contracts are going for.
Yeah, so I can't give you a dollar amount, but there's a clause in all of our bids now that prohibits companies from installing proprietary systems, because current contractors can come in, put in all their proprietary systems, and then 4 years down the road when we go back out to bid, they're the only ones that can bid. So it in turn costs the town more money.
Right.
Because they can beat out the other bidders, bid high, you know.
There's no competition, right?
Yeah. So it is in all of our bids. Penfield is in all of our bids. We have another clause that says, you know, postponed until spring of 2017. So technically, like, it does make a difference. But if the system works,
How long has that clause been in your current contracts?
we honestly only started the past 3 years because of our current vendors.
Could we-
This specifically.
So-
Okay.
I mean, I think there's some more questions to be asked of the town. I mean, is this the only notifier system in town? So if we get rid of this one, there's still 3 others we have to deal with. I mean, at $50,000 is a lot of money just to save potentially.
Right, and
with
it
the
would only be one facility. Most of our systems are Silent Night, Firelight, and I think there's Honeywell as well. And those are non-proprietary systems. So any bidder can come in and bid on them.
How about a real-world appraisal of what's there? Is that a good system? You've been working with it out there and supervising this project. Is it, what you've seen and built and,
Looked for an alarm system years ago, or alarm company. It's a very common system, the one that's in there, and like Kevin said, you know, I think this is more of an issue where it becomes maintenance after us.
right.
I don't really think it affects
But the
us in any way, shape, and form. The system's going to be recertified, it's going to be reset up, it's going to work. If there's a fire, it should do what it does. And I know you said security at one point.
Right.
It's strictly only fire.
It is, okay.
Has nothing to do with
That's what I was looking for.
only
So,
fire.
so the whole intrusion thing is not included, or not, the building's not fit out for that yet?
It's nothing to do with security.
The condition of the panels and the devices, they, as you walk through the building, they're good, they're decent, they're not dangling down and been smashed or anything like that?
Yeah, I think Mark can probably update us a little better. I mean, I think we're going to need some, you know, maybe new heat detector heads and a couple other odds and ends.
Right.
That is, I think we already have budgets for that.
Okay.
So it'll be a working system. I think the problem is more after we're gone and not why we're here.
All right. Just to add, again, a completely different wrinkle, maybe you know this, Ben, or maybe Shawmut, or maybe both of you know it. Where are we on allowances? Do we have extra money, he says optimistically, regarding allowances? We've been working long enough that you just keep on anticipating these?
Is there another one?
Sorry, am I missing something?
No.
Give us a quick explanation on this, Exhibit C. This Exhibit C represents $69,170 of contract or GMP allowances that are included in the GMP. So, are there any here, I guess the real $64,000 question is, are there any of these allowances that are not going to be used?
All right, well, currently, right now, what we've used is, from this whole list, is $270 for temporary signage. That's it. But I do have work currently going on under the electrical allowance, that's $7,500 additional electrical work for stuff under the building that needed to be corrected. The majority of that $7,500 allowance will be used up. I'm assuming that at least more than half of it for what we're doing now will be used once I get that proposal in from the electrical contractor.
Jim, can I ask a question that's not on the allowance, back to the fire alarm?
Yeah.
If the building was still in place, we never had a flood, do you change a fire alarm system every 10 years? In other words, in the normal course of events, is there any standard that says after a certain period of time you have to redo your entire fire alarm system, or you only change it when it malfunctions? See, because I'm trying to, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you used the word nice. I just want to make sure that if we put it in 3 years, someone's going to come through and say, Connecticut requires that every 10 years you put a whole new fire alarm system in, and therefore we're going to do it in 3 years.
I think the short answer is no. It's like any type of electronic technology, it changes, right? If you had a system that was put in your building 25 years ago, yeah, you might very well be replacing it because the technology is just like, you know, Stone Age in comparison. I mean, if it functions and then does what the code requires in terms of heat and smoke detection and monitoring the fire sprinkler system, then it's fine. The fire safety code is a little different than the building code in that for commercial buildings, they do get inspected periodically. You know, with the building code, you build your building, you're never required to do anything else to it ever again. But with the fire code, you do have to maintain your systems in operation.
Yeah, it's been a battle, as you might have imagined, going from some of the comments here about proprietary systems that don't talk to each other. This market's finally straightening itself out. But if you had a good system up and running, that's why I was asking questions about whether it was damaged or not. It should be pretty easy to get it back online. So tell us a little bit about this and what this document means to us.
All right, these are all the allowances that are in the GMP within the trade division packages. The divisions are listed on the left. 1 is cleaning, 6 is rough carpentry, and so forth. items that, like I said, we've only used $270 in signage so far, but we will be hitting the $7,500 electrical as we speak, and that's going to be, I would have to at least say $5,000 of that allowance being used now. The items that I feel as though we won't be touching would be the winter conditions, labor and material allowance. And this is barring no tropical storm comes up the coast and puts a monkey wrench on that. And the additional traffic control measures, I don't think we're going to need to use any of that. And, you know, touch-up painting, we'll have to see as we go. But I don't see us using all of this. I mean, I do certainly see using quite a chunk of it. The HVAC repairs, the $10,000, I mean, that's almost like a $10,000 contingency for when we start all the mechanicals. You know, so we already have $10,000 put aside in these allowances for any of those repairs. Now, hopefully, if there are repairs, it'll only be internal to the unit. A lot of the parts for a 4-year air handling unit are still readily available. So if things do go wrong, hopefully we won't need new rooftop units. They can be fixed internally. So I wouldn't want to, you know, commit to anything above or less what we would use in these allowances until we do turn everything on. But certainly, you know, like the winter conditions, I don't see us using that. We also have winter conditions in our PRs, so, and that was $17,000. So, I mean, collectively in winter conditions, we have 27, and we did keep them in our GMP simply because now we're going into the hurricane season, and we didn't feel comfortable just saying, hey, we'll never need to use it. But, you know, if we don't get a big storm that comes up the coast, a lot of those environmental conditions allowances we won't need.
I wasn't suggesting that we start cutting into this or using this money. I just wanted the committee to understand that there is another area of uncommitted funds.
Correct.
that
And there
could
is,
be uncommitted funds.
there also is the 25% shared savings as well with allowances and contingency.
So what was that, Mark?
Allowances have the same clause on the 25% shared savings in our contract.
So just ask.
Do they?
Yes, they do, yeah.
Okay. So if I could, if nobody has any objection, take us back to the line item, the budget item, and that is whether or not the committee is interested in advancing one or both of, or one, any one or all three of 3, 4, and 5 as far as at landscaping and getting landscaping started. I personally feel it's important to landscape the building for opening, for what we have tried to do for the community. I think that we can get into the bioswale in the spring if we had to. It seems to be a little bit more, I don't know, utilitarian or industrial in the bioswale than it does the planning around the building. If we did the planning, I'm still worried, I'm thinking about the math. If we did the planning around the building, that number is, again,
The bid number was 36,241.
so if we vote, if we,
Just a clarification, so that's the low-lying plants in front of the building. If we also add the trees in front of the building, it's another 7,500.
okay, so let's, all right, so you take 3 and 4 together? I'm just
Yes.
trying this out.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to rip up the plan, we can put trees in there.
Okay. So 3 and 4 together, and if we did 3 and 4 together, are we talking like an $11,000 vote? Because we've got 30 in the document?
44 roughly, plus our 2% markup, so another 1,000 roughly, so it'd be about 45 minus 30, it'd be a $15,000 change.
Is there interest in that? I mean, I think, I'm thinking of the planting season, I'm thinking about delivering a complete project. We're not going to deliver this project without landscaping, I don't think. Of course, there was a chorus of response. Go ahead.
Somebody just said that if we only do number 4, it'll be a problem putting the trees in later.
Not a problem, but you're going to.
Oh, you do them both.
It's not a straight ad. I mean,
Oh, you do, if you're going to get into that, you might as well do them together. It's a package of that
Right.
band of landscaping around the
Well,
building.
then, I think that's the most important. I think maybe even Public Works can do the bioswales in the
Or we can do it,
spring.
right.
Maybe the town will do it, maybe somebody else will do it. Maybe a corporation will do it, and they can have their name plaque there, right on the road.
So,
Law firm.
just so we're clear, if we do 3 and 4, there is no money in there for bioswales anymore. There is no grass for bioswales anymore. You have to add grass on top
No.
of that figure to put there in the bioswales.
I think we have to look into that a little bit more and,
Yep.
and how it was actually phrased on the documents. And I mean, we do need to have grass.
There needs to be
as a
something in there. I
minimum.
just want to make sure that when we say a $15,000 bid, that's not exactly true. At least in my
If
understanding
there
right
was a scenario where we were losing all our money to plant the grass to do this landscaping, it would probably be very easy work for DPW to add, because they are already rough grading the bioswales and putting in all the drainage. To add a thin layer of topsoil and grass is probably not that much of an
Let's
extra.
research it, though, just in case it's
We
in
do
the
need to
bid.
research that, yes.
And you also don't have a deadline on plants, and if you put grass there, you can wait a little bit longer before you make your decision on the grass, because you don't have plants you have to choose within 2 weeks.
Is Shawmut prepared to plant the landscaping, given the current schedule?
That's close, but we'll get it. You know, we're looking at getting that into mid to end of October. We're really thinking we can get a lot of that landscaping pretty much complete. It's right there on the schedule.
For the record, when, if we need to determine what the cost will be for topsoil and grass in the bioswale, we have unit prices for that in the bid, so we can calculate that very quickly.
Okay.
One on that too, Jim, is that for a final C of O, you need to have all the soil's got to be stabilized
Yeah.
for a final C of O. It's either got to be hay or grass. So even if the bioswale is not done now, you probably either have to hay it for your final C of O or do some grass.
Yeah.
Okay, but I think we're willing to come back to that. I think what we really are talking about is a planting season and getting the building back and getting it finished in landscape. So, and that is those two, keep track of me here, 3 and 4, right?
Yeah.
Is there a motion to have the committee authorize the construction manager to proceed with alternate ads 3 and 4, as far as landscaping is concerned?
Can you just tell me one more time, if we approve 3 and 4, the additional cost will be $15,000?
Well, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to refine it.
But that doesn't include putting grass at the bioswale and topsoil.
You're going to look at the contract documents regarding that,
Yeah, so yes.
okay?
Now, my only question on the timing of all this is getting them to be able to pull the trigger on the plantings in front of the building.
That's what we're voting on. We
Okay, so
think.
you're going to vote as like a not-to-exceed number for,
If 15,000 is your not to exceed, and you're going to come back to us with details, fine. We want to get the planting
We
season.
don't need a not to exceed. These are hard numbers. These are
Okay,
bid
but then
numbers.
then what is the number?
It's going to be roughly around 15,000.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Either we give us a not to exceed, or don't give us a rough, or come back with a final number. Not to exceed $15,000 could easily be the proposal before this committee.
Let me do the
That's
math.
the
real quick.
proposal. Okay, I understand. that. I'm willing to
Steve,
vote
go
on it.
ahead. Discussion on this. We don't have a motion yet. I hope we
Right.
will.
So the,
Yeah, thank you. Yep. Don't drive towards New
So
Haven.
so before we start throwing numbers around, right now, then, the $15,000 plus or minus that Mark is calculating now, then we're automatically assuming DPW's planting grass, which we
Not
haven't...
yet, no. No, we could come back here in a month and say, and when the spring comes, maybe there's time left to plant out the bioswales, the building's back, the units have been fired up on the roof, we're more comfortable about contingency, we say go ahead with the bioswales, or we set aside a contribution for ourselves, Shawmut or DPW, to do the bioswales.
I'm sorry, I understand we'll have time later on. The fact is, if in fact Shawmut finishes his job by the end of this calendar year, the $15,000 that Mark is calculating now, I don't know if it leaves us with anything but rough soil in those bioswales.
It's got it's tabled. They're going to, I believe that the topsoil and grass in the bioswales is in the GMP.
the reason why I say we have to research it is because I know on the drawings that it says grass, base bid, landscaping, add alternate. Now, does that mean the base bid comes out of the $30,000 allowance? I think that's what these guys are saying. I don't know how that works. I guess that's how that works. I think Colliers and myself and Shawmut need to review it and discuss it.
And I understand that. I guess for my colleagues are saying $15,000 maximum may not be $15,000 maximum.
No, all I'm saying is for items 3 and 4 that represent planning around the building, which we have said in the past is vitally important to present the building to the neighborhood. That's what's on the table at the
I mean,
moment.
perhaps to answer your question, as a worst-case scenario, we're back at the next building committee meeting.
Right.
Talking about grass, which we have more
$800
time
for
on.
grass and the-
I understand, but I'm just doing this for...
Or deferring all the plantings in the bioswale to another time.
I understand that. I'm just so that Mr. Zeef is clear that we may see another change relative to landscaping at some point in time.
Two more.
We may see another change. It's either grass or the full planting. I'm just trying to explain that because
Just,
Grass in the front.
Jim,
And
It won't be full planting.
if they said we
unless-
have till October to do this, am I correct? Why don't we defer this till next meeting when we know? Because we're voting, I think we're voting on a number, not really knowing whether that's the real number.
I don't agree. We
If
we
I may.
have real numbers. We have real bid numbers here.
There's a lead time to pick out and procure the plants, and we're almost there. We can't, if we wait till September, they're not going to have enough time to get the plants, and they may not be available.
Okay,
Are we limited, are we going to wind up spending no more than $45,000 on plantings?
If you
As of this- as of
vote
tonight.
in this way,
Yeah.
yes, those are the alternate ones that will be planted, and nothing else will be planted, and the only discussion would be, do we have to come up with a few more dollars for grass and the bioswales?
if we have to, we may turn around and vote to plant out the bioswales. The key is to get the landscaping around the building going while we have the season to pick and plant.
I have
Ellery,
that.
did I hear, I don't think I heard it clearly, but a motion to,
Yeah, I was going to make a motion that we
for 3 and 4?
approve 3 and 4, and that we appropriate the funds from the contingency over and above the 30,000 to meet those estimates.
And the number over and above the 30,000 is?
14,167.
Thank you, 14,167.
I'll
Thank you.
amend the motion.
Is there a second to that?
Yeah, I'll second.
There's a made and seconded. Okay, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Have enough people to vote? Do we still have a quorum?
Yes, we do. All in favor? Against? Thank you. Fire alarm system, we can give you a pretty quick answer, I gather, from knowing this committee as well as I do.
Use the
Is-
one we got.
Huh?
Use the one we got.
There's a motion made that we continue on with the fire alarm system that exists. Was there a second?
I'll second it.
Made and second?
Wait a second. I'm still writing the other one.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Take a
Okay,
recess.
So we're making another motion for the fire?
Right, the
Okay.
proposal, the proposal to renovate, redo, reconstruct the fire alarm system?
Proposal was to actually replace the fire alarm
Replace.
system with a new
The
one.
proposal to replace the fire alarm system.
I still had a question on that.
Okay. It was
I-
made and
I-
seconded, but go ahead.
Well, who did it?
No, go ahead, Steve.
I'd like to know if this is the only town building that has this proprietary system in it. That's what, and I know these guys can't answer, it's not their
Corin
responsibility.
said there was Honeywell systems in town.
I think so.
Notifier is Honeywell. Notifier is also Firelight.
Oh, okay,
Honeywell
so-
owns Notifier and Honeywell.
I just want to make sure
I
that
mean,
we don't have...
Honeywell owns Notifier and Firelight.
I just want to make sure that the town doesn't have to have a separate maintenance contract just for this pavilion, is my point.
We wouldn't
No.
have to go up.
Okay.
No. But Steve, to your point, and I apologize for being quick on it, but to your point, we could sit here a month from now and reconsider if this gets developed further.
No, I just wanted to,
I want-
and I could see replacing it if it's the only building in town that has one proprietary maintenance contract for one pavilion in this town.
Right.
If there's multiple facilities that we're responsible for as a town to maintain that have this type of system, then I don't see why we'd ever replace the system.
Okay.
Who
So-
made the motion?
I did.
And who seconded?
I seconded.
Okay.
So the motion's been made in second, and then a clarification. Is the committee comfortable, without objection, to moving the fire alarm system up on as an agenda item? Because it's now been moved up with the planting because of the contingency issues. No problem with that? It wasn't old. It's further down the list. None at all. Okay, thank you. Any discussion regarding the motion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, which is to not replace the existing fire alarm system, to repair it, certify it, get it online in accordance with the contract documents?
Correct.
Okay? Did you get that, Ellen?
Mm-hmm.
All in favor? Against? Abstain? Thank you. Okay, just check the Novocaine. What, I don't know whether we want to get... We'll go back to the agenda and see if we can have a brief, concise report from Shawmut. Do we have just a brief project summary report? Basically, project status and schedule, and then a quick discussion regarding look ahead, which obviously would include the meeting, the move date for the building.
So I
Does
could make
everybody
it
know
real
Jeff?
quick.
Does everybody know Jeff, superintendent on site? Okay.
I could make it real quick, and if you want it that fast, and say we're moving the building next Tuesday. The move is a few weeks ahead of schedule. We lost a week, not quite a week, because we had to jump the move up from the 24th or 25th to next Tuesday, only due to the major equipment that we needed to run the building. It was stuck on another project. That was really the only delay, otherwise would have been moved by now. The building's moving next Tuesday at 9 a.m. The rest of the project, I could go through this line by line. If anybody sees something they have a question on, let me know. But the east wing is built as far as we can build it. The connection building between the east wing and the west wing has already partially been built. We've built what we could to still afford us room to get the steel out, the lift steel out. Grade beams have been pretty much completed. Everything's backfilled. The building is really ready to rock and roll and move. As soon as the building gets moved next Tuesday, our subcontractors have already been notified. Really what's going to happen is you'll start seeing quite a bit of activity there. The connection building, within a week or so, will start getting built, because it takes a few days to get the lift steel out. Steel and general trades contractors are already on schedule to get underneath the building, do the shimming and leveling. We checked the grade beams today again, and I think the grade beams currently are within about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch across the entire grade beam, so the shimming process should be pretty easy. And the site contractor will be on site within a week of the building getting moved, and start all the underground utility tie-ins. So really, everything's on schedule. It's kind of detailed in here. This is showing a 3-week, but if you look at some of the items for each individual scope, there's a written date in there which kind of looks out farther. And as we go through the project and we get certain phases done, we update the schedule and add more scope in here to help the contractors just keep an eye on what's coming up. So the job's going well.
So if you were to look at the overall master schedule, the GMP schedule, and those line items and durations, the project is slightly ahead of schedule. Where is it?
We're slightly ahead. Slightly ahead. There's items that if you look at, like the east wing building, may show in the GMP that it was a little further ahead at any given point, because we were only supposed to build a small section of that connection building. But we're with the extra couple of weeks we gained, we'll easily be able to get everything done.
How do you coordinate with Wolf, the moving contractor, and the carpentry and the steel contractor and so forth? How's that all go? Does everybody know what they're doing?
Yeah, I pretty much talk to every subcontractor on, they'll tell you more than I should. But it's a really good coordination. The teams that are on site and the foreman that each subcontractor has, they're really, really good. They've been great with communication. When we run into issues, they've been really good about kind of switching gears, getting stuff kind of finished and moving on. So they've been excellent.
I would address this both to you and Kevin. With the building, what system of checks and balances do we have that the building is going back exactly where it was?
The biggest control that we have over that is surveying. So Shawmut has been getting the surveyor out to the site on a fairly regular basis, pinning the corners of the existing building where it sits over onto the new foundation, checking it, back checking it. There are a few areas we worked out a few little dimensional adjustments to the breezeway to accommodate the size and shape of the building and the position of the building. There haven't been any significant issues that I'm aware of. But it's mostly a surveying exercise to make sure it goes back in the right place. It didn't. I don't think it went exactly along a straight line. It did have a little bit of a sideways move when it was moving.
When it came out, and they can compensate for
Before
that
it
going
came out.
back.
Even before it came out, I think there
Yeah,
was.
they have flexibility a little bit.
Yeah.
That's so we didn't have to move the flagpole of the guard shack.
Does the building at any additional, I know it came off the site, the original foundation area, level and without any interior damage. Is the building have any more or less risk when it's moved back?
No. No more, no less.
Anything, questions from the committee from?
I just had a question, looking at, has UI committed, so thinking about the rooftops again, right? We got to get the building back in place, we got to get the gas piping, all that done, now we're waiting for permanent power, I assume.
Correct.
So is UI committed to October 17th? I mean, are they on board if we lose a week? But I mean, I've dealt with utilities before. We can't always count on what they say they're going to do. October's getting late to figure, I mean, again, everyone's worried about the rooftop. We keep talking about the rooftop unit. So how's the UI coordination been going?
It's been going good. They kind of know the schedule. Our subcontractors know what they have to get done. We've actually already had the gas company on site, which is something I think I brought up the last meeting. We're going to have to start getting some communication. We have our communication for the coordination of the gas installs in the field. We have to make sure that the gas company is coordinating with the town as far as getting all that approvals done, because that's, we're not contracting with them. The town of Fairfield is. So we'll make sure that that conversation is going. That'll start next week.
So you need both gas and electricity for the rooftop units?
No, we need really electricity for the rooftop units, I believe.
It's got to bump the motors,
I don't think we need,
Are they heat?
oh, yeah, you know what, I think, yeah, we'll, I'll have to look into that. We can fire the units, or we can start the units up and check if they're running. I don't think we necessarily need the,
I think we can bump the
the
motors.
heat portion of it going.
Yeah.
I'll have to look into that.
I'm just, yeah, so again, UI is set for October 17th, or is that when we're estimating we would need them?
Yeah, I think that was the date.
No, I see that in
Yeah.
here. I
Yeah,
just
but
didn't know.
they've been coordinated with. They know the dates.
Okay.
They know the dates.
So that, when you say UI, you're talking about primary,
The primary
transformer,
line.
secondaries, the whole building energized, or just the circuits to the
The whole,
HVAC?
they're going to, so what we do is UI comes in, we're going to have our secondary lines in, we're going to have the transformer pad in, we're going to have the conduit for the primary in, so UI ultimately will come in, they'll inspect all of the whole entire system, make sure that everything is what it's supposed to be, and then they will come in, they will do their connections, and they will fire up the system. They start the whole process.
Okay.
We have everything connected prior to. So that time is getting in the primary conduits, that time is getting in the secondary conduits, getting the connections made to the panels, getting the pad in, and getting everything set for them. And we actually also have to have grading done in front of that pad so that they can safely back their trucks up and set them up and rig the unit on. So
That's-
there's,
yeah.
and even, we have to go as far as having the bollards in with the safety chain. Those have to be set. So that's all kind of been worked out. That's why we kind of need that bank of time after the building goes in. All those things have to be in place for them to do it. And they do know what our date is.
That was my biggest concern, because we're at their you're at their mercy.
Right,
We're all at
exactly,
their
yeah.
mercy. A storm comes through and we can't get that thing set, you're a week or two away from
Yeah, there's-
power.
We can only make sure they know it's there, and anything that happens, you know,
Do you have a-
on their end is out of our control. We'll certainly push for it, but,
You have a paving date?
pardon me?
Is your schedule, not this one, but there's a, when is the paving?
Actually, the paving, I believe, is in here. Paving, pavers, curbs, is right around 11:15.
So plants are open, that shouldn't be a problem? About what date, if you move it on the 30th, what date is it anchored down to the foundation?
So, we move it on, the actual move is on the 30th. There's about, from 8:30 to 9:02, the building is lowered into place. We get it at the height we need to get it at so the other trades can come in and start their shimming process. At the same time, it's sort of, these dates overlap because what happens is they bring the building on the 30th. It takes them a couple of days to bring it down and get it to a height where other trades can start. Once we start from one end of the building and work over, we'll probably go east to west. This way they can get it shimmed. They'll start pulling out that side of steel. There's a whole process of concrete piers that have to go in on top of the grade beams at the some of the deck areas and some of the connection building areas. So it's kind of a whole bunch of things going on at one time.
Who's responsible for the level building for us?
As far as a level, well, ultimately, I'm responsible. I'll be overseeing everybody and checks and balances, but, and I'm sure Kevin's going to want to take a peek. But the steel is the steel contractor. They'll be underneath the building. After it comes down, we'll have a laser set up. That'll be something that we'll kind of coordinate before everybody goes underneath. Steel contractor is responsible for leveling all the steel, and the general trades or carpentry contractor is going to be responsible for leveling all of the wood that we put in underneath with the wood legs.
When does the responsibility pass from the house mover or the building mover to the, when does their responsibility end?
So there was really nothing written, so we actually had a meeting, and Shawmut has asked the house mover to work in conjunction with both the steel contractor and the carpentry contractor during that time that they're doing the setting process. And they kind of agreed to be there to offer, whatever help they could offer, because they'll actually be pulling their lift steel out as those guys, as each of those trades gets their shimming and their setting done.
Is there any?
So they'll be on site. It'll be kind of really a community effort as far as the three main contractors.
Is there any risk to people going under the building?
No.
Okay.
No, those risks, actually, we've had the fire department out on site. One of our OSHA requirements is to make sure we have a rescue plan because it's considered a confined space. The fire department's been on site. We've discussed it with them. We actually have a backboard recovery system that if somebody, passes out from heat stroke, we can slide them out, but in an event that somebody actually is injured or has something more severe, the fire department has already been on site and is aware of what they need to bring for a response to that site for a confined rescue. So we've kind of worked that out with the town.
Questions from the committee for Shawmut?
When do you expect the mechanical inspections to be finished?
The mechanical inspections as far as the town or our end of it, or?
Well, your end of it, the inspections of the heating, the plumbing, the
At
electric,
risk.
in terms of
When do
a
we define-
targeted completion date.
Once everything is powered up, I think it'd be safe to say at the end of October. By the end of October, I think we'll have everything powered up. We'll have had an opportunity maybe to get everybody in there and start looking into the units once they've been powered. I would say by the By the end of October. Once the power goes on, we'll already have talked to our subcontractors to make sure that they're kind of coming in right away to be sure that they're checking on the systems. So I would say towards the end of October.
Other questions for Shawmut? Any risks or issues that might impact cost or schedule that we should know about?
I think we've come across any so far. No?
Ken, you're going to be here from this point forward?
Yes, I'll be here going forward. Brian has moved on from Shawmut. He's a different career path for him right now, so right now I'll be taking over the job from here to the end.
Good. Questions from the committee? Need any more information? Thank you. Thanks.
No problem.
You guys are doing a great job down there. Ben, you want to give us a rundown?
This will be quick. A lot of this we've already covered tonight.
We never repeat ourselves here.
We'll try not to.
Thanks.
Okay, we've seen this document, so we'd really like to have you, I believe, would just give us any highlights and,
Yep, real quick. One other note to add to the permanent power turn-on situation that Steve was bringing up. We understand the tendency of a utility company to fall through sometimes on dates and conditions, so we've had poor Kevin over here chase down in writing from UI that our contract documents suit their needs, so that we're not going to run into a situation when they come to do this, turn on the power, they're going to throw any curveballs at us at the last minute. So we've been through a lot of this already in this meeting, so we're going to go pretty quickly here. The construction progress summary, Shawmut just laid out for you, so we can just skip through that unless you guys have questions for me. Inspections to date, Jeff has done a really fantastic job of keeping a log of all inspections with the town and with special testing laboratories. And to date, we haven't been told of anything that has not been accepted by any parties. Quality of data has been, in my opinion, satisfactory and excellent, and I think that Kevin would agree. Unresolved major issues, we discussed this earlier, and we took care of those with votes, so we can skip through that. Total project budget, this 41% number, that is total project, that's not just the GMP, that's all the soft costs that are involved. This is elaborated in the back of this document. You can flip through it if you'd like, but we have a very elaborate explanation of where all the costs are in the budget on the back of this document. GMP paid to date, which was effective on July 28th. We have paid 40% of the total GMP. We still have unpaid to date 60%, and we are about 50% complete with construction. After tonight's pay application, if it is approved and voted on, we will be at 51% of the GMP paid to date. As we discussed earlier, our owner's contingency remaining, which doesn't include shares from allowances or construction contingency, because we do not calculate that till the end. And owner's contingency, we have $293,100. Pending change orders we'll discuss later on tonight when the invoices go for a vote. The possible future exposures we just discussed, which was the fire alarm and the landscaping. We have one other exposure, if you will, but it's actually a credit that I'm not sure if will be tabled tonight or not, but there has been talk about deleting the exterior drinking fountains that are adjacent to the exterior shower. So I have that listed on here just because it's been talked about at OAC meetings. Approved change orders and budget transfers, we don't need to go through those because we've already gone through those at previous building committee meetings, and we have just provided a handful of images of what the site looks like as of Tuesday. And then, as I said before, the last couple of documents attached here are an expansive view of the actual budget, or the actual project budget, and what's been paid and what contingency is left. And then the last page, or last 2 pages, you will see our contingency log and what we have down as pending and deferrable exposures to the project currently. That's all I have for you, Jim.
Thank you very much. Questions on the board? Thank you for getting that out for us. Anything that's not in this report that you would like to report?
I think that, I agree with Jim. I think that Shawmut out in the field, construction-wise, has done a really fantastic job, and they're staying on schedule. So unless barring any catastrophes or any unknown issues at the moment, I think that as of now, we're trending to deliver building on time and possibly under budget.
That would leave us, Kevin, you want to, anything you need to know?
So our office has continued with architect, engineer, site visits. We attend the job meetings with the team once a week, and, you know, occasionally we'll make in-between site visits to look at the progress of the work. You know, as Jeff mentioned, the foundations are complete and ready for the building to be rolled back into place. We did have a few issues with some low test results on the concrete, which have been resolved through some additional testing. So the issue has been closed out. The portion of the east wing that's been built looks like a mini finished building. It's painted on the outside. All the lockers are built on the inside. So it was an excellent chance for us to kind of work out all the bugs and kind of do mock-ups and, you know, make some adjustments as needed. So I've been very happy with the progress of what's been built. I don't know of any significant open issues. I think, you know, the change orders and other issues you're looking at on the list are fairly minor. There are a few little things here and there that we deal with as they come up. For instance, we're going to add a couple of hose bibs that have been requested by the rec department as far as operators of the building. It's a fairly small item, things like that. So I don't have anything else significant to report, but I'm happy to answer questions.
I would just add that the regular meeting you discussed has been changed to 8:30 as opposed to 8 o'clock.
The on-site project meeting?
Yes.
Okay. And Kevin, you mentioned it, there was a question on the concrete testing protocols that has been resolved as far as a portion or some section of the grade beams?
Yeah, so the concrete grade beams are under the west wing of the building mostly, and they were poured on 17 different pour days over a course of about a month. Each pour was sampled and tested by special testing laboratories. In addition to our office, did the rebar inspections. A portion of the pours had test results that did not come up to the design strength at 28 days. Some of those did at later breaks. Some that did not, we had additional core testing that was done in the field, and we whittled it down to one pour that was still not quite up to 4,000 psi. And based on an engineering review I did of the grade beams, I concluded that it didn't have an impact on the foundation.
Has that been forwarded to the building inspector?
You know, that's a good point. We forwarded it to the team, but I didn't send it to the building official yet, so I will
Your
close the
summary,
loop with them.
yeah, okay, good.
Yes.
And I would like to say this is, I'm not saying it's routine, but it's, comes up and has been resolved in a normal, routine way as far as construction projects are concerned, right?
Yeah, I mean, concrete is, you're baking a cake, so to speak, and you have all these ingredients that have to come together under the right conditions and be handled in the right way, so that's why we do testing.
Right.
So it's not unusual to have some low breaks on a project, and I think all the necessary steps were taken here.
And the low breaks are the test cylinders, samples that are taken during the pours and then subsequently crushed to see how strong the concrete is.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
correct.
okay, obviously, because this is a publicized meeting here, so I want to make sure everybody understands. Anything else on quality control? Everything going to go back together? I think we did have a discussion about testing, a pull-out test for the anchors. We're going to go ahead with that?
That's the plan. What we concluded, because of the confined space under the building that Jeff was talking about, we'll test sample bolts out in the open where it can actually be done.
Right.
It might be difficult to do under the building.
Well, these are anchor bolts that are going to anchor the plates, the steel plates that are on the bottom of the columns to support the building, and crucial to making sure the building doesn't move. So,
That's right, and logistically, because we're moving a building back onto a foundation, we couldn't go with normal cast-in-place bolts where they're actually stuck into the concrete wet. They had to be post-installed. So we've just been discussing some quality control where we'll do some pull tests on the bolts to verify they have the pull-out capacity.
These are bolts that are about 3/4 of an inch in diameter, 5/8?
Most of them are 5/8. There are some that anchor the existing columns that are larger because that's the size bolt that was in the existing column.
So the idea here is to make sure they don't pull out. In other words, they're going to be drilled in and then screwed in. And one standard practice is to take a couple of them and try to pull them out.
Yeah,
with a load test.
it's not an unusual test. It is done from time to time. I think, a fairly simple setup process. It's typically like a hydraulic
Yeah.
ram that you crank up and exert pressure on.
I don't have any
bolt.
problems with the testing protocol. My concern is, so you're going to test them in a free area without the building, just to see how the grade beams perform if one of these, and you're going to pull one out just to see if it's
That's correct. We're going to
meets specification and manufacturer's
plan is to
requirements.
test them to failure because they're sacrificial test
Right,
bolts,
right.
or to the limits of the equipment.
Right. Okay.
Which both of those parameters will be well above the actual loads they'll be subjected to.
Okay. So the idea is here, belts and suspenders. We want to make sure these bolts test out. And I know it's not always done, but we'll do it.
We're going to do it.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Is there anything, and maybe this is a good question for our site super, any other, if you're testing one of these bolts out in the open, not underneath the building, and the exercise, the operation of installing the bolt under the building, drilling and installing this bolt, is there any QC procedure to make sure these holes are straight and the bit doesn't wobble and all of a sudden the anchor bolt goes in and it's really not holding much? How do we solve that problem?
The first step is a visual inspection, so, observing them drill the hole and thread the anchor in, which would be a combination of myself, Jeff, the site super. It's not to say we can't test the bolts once they're in place. I'm just foreseeing that it's going to be very difficult to do because there's not much headroom underneath the building. We can probably test columns around the periphery of the building that are under similar installation conditions but are more accessible for testing.
And by definition, more accessible to get a good drill hole and a good installation, right? So kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, because I think quality control, again, we've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in this foundation and this building and this galvanized steel and so forth. And the critical point is going to be how this steel is bolted down to the foundations, especially under storm conditions. So we want to make sure that's absolutely done right.
Understood.
Okay. Any questions on engineer's report? Any upcoming risks or anything we should know about, Kevin?
Building's going back, as Jeff mentioned. The Wolf has lifted the building to put the dollies under it and built these rails out of timber cribbing. That's already in there. You probably noticed if you've driven by, it's a lot higher than it used to be.
Yeah.
All signs are that they're going to be ready to go.
And you're satisfied with the construction controls as far as final elevation, building location?
I am. The most important thing in that regard is surveying. So, that's where Jeff and I will share information. And, fortunately, it seems like all the trades are using the same surveyor. It was a local surveying company, Huntington, very reliable. So I have confidence in the fact that we'll have that confirmed. The most important thing is bottom of structure. We can't go below elevation 13 to bottom of structure. So, the important thing is that gets checked.
Who
early.
establishes that? Where does that benchmark come from?
We have it on the site. We have 2 locations where we've permanently marked.
But who gave them to you? Who?
Hunting.
Well,
And Huntington-
benchmarks in general, I mean, there are benchmarks throughout town, some of them established by the town of Fairfield, some established by DOT or other agencies or governments, and those are used by surveyors to kind of bring the point over to a property, and they've done that.
Has the town coordinated, the town is in agreement?
I don't know that we've really, I think the beginning of the project, when Chris was out, I believe the town surveyor was out, correct me if I'm wrong?
The engineering department does have a surveyor on staff, and he has been in the loop on our initial discussions about moving the building and control points, and I believe he confirmed some of Huntington's information, and he's the one actually who provided us with the elevation certificate for the benchmark.
We need to make sure that 13 is 13 by anybody's calculations, standards, imagination, whatever,
Yes.
right? I mean, we don't want the building at the wrong elevation.
I think it's important to involve the town now, because
Right. Well, they were initially, but it wouldn't be bad to double-check and make sure that we have...
why should we take the risk? Should be the town.
Right. Well, the town is established, I
Well, it's
think
a
you're correct. The
combination of efforts,
town established a
The
benchmark.
contractor is obligated to put the building at the right elevation. The benchmarks are supposed to be given to the contractor by the owner, which would, in this case, would be the town of Fairfield.
Just as-
It's a combined effort, and there have been, I'm watching what you're doing, you're watching what I'm doing kind of thing.
We need to...
We could bring, I don't know the gentleman I don't know if you do.
I do.
Maybe we give him a call, and if there's a concern, which, all the information in the town, the way that surveying works is, they get these sort of readings that kind of plug into their equipment. And I know that, I think Huntington was able to get that information from the town.
This wouldn't be the first project that had a screwed-up elevation,
We
so...
could ask them to come out and make a benchmark right on the grade beam, and we could come off of that.
I think that would be helpful to make sure, I would agree with Ellery, to make sure that the town and Huntington and Shawmut and your firm are all in sync regarding the elevation, and that the benchmark's reestablished or established on the grade beam, so we're just satisfied, it's just done. This is the project that keeps on giving, and we need to go belts and suspenders on this. We don't want it at 12.91. Right? That's the change order next. Any questions?
All of a sudden, the FEMA money's gone because
Right,
we're,
right.
you know.
Any questions? I think we have one on approvals?
Yeah, we have to go through approvals. I don't know if this is new business or not, because we mentioned something about water fountains that I wanted to bring up.
Oh, okay, good. Bring it up.
So,
We can, you call it
Apparently-
new business, it will be a new business agenda item. Go ahead.
because it was raised up. So, as part of this financial subcommittee's review of change requests or potential change requests, one came across our desk for the elimination of the 2 exterior water fountains. What our subcommittee decided to do was table that as a scope change and make sure that the committee was in agreement that that was the right, a prudent change for the project, since we hadn't talked about it. So that was we're not talking about it tonight as far as approvals are concerned with invoices and change orders, but I didn't know if we...
New business, and we'll bring it up.
Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, Steve.
All right, so on to invoice review. So we're going to talk about 6 items this evening. The first that, as is typical, the Finance Subcommittee walks through all the invoices that are presented between meetings. The first invoice that we're offering for approval and recommend approval is invoice number 5661 from DeStefano and Chamberlain in the amount of $10,910, and we recommend approval.
What is it for, Steve?
Does that, what?
Does everybody have a copy of that?
There's some extra copies if you need
It was sent out, yeah, Andrew sent it out, sorry.
No, that's all right. I don't have it with me, that's all. That's great. That's
I'll
all
take
we
a
need,
copy.
As
I'll
long
take one,
as
too.
our chief accountant and financial officer have it in front of them.
That's it.
Thank you, sir.
You can get it down. Eyes, we need the eagle eye. Okay, sorry, Steve.
I'm
I
sorry,
need
did
to know
you,
what it's for.
what it's for design and construction administration services by DeStefano and Chamberlain.
You want to take these one at a time for a vote, Steve, or how, yeah, that's the way we have been doing it.
Sure.
So you presented this, and now the obvious question, is this consistent with their budget and
It's consistent with the budget, and it's all supported, and the work has been performed and is due and owing.
I entertain a motion to approve invoice 5661 in the amount of $10,910.
Second it.
Who made it?
He made it, right?
You did?
I guess I made the motion, yes.
Did.
And I just seconded.
And you seconded it.
Makes
Check
it
the,
a lot
che-
easier with the same people.
check the elevations. You can see where we're going here.
Right. The second invoice that we,
Are we doing them separately or each one?
We're going to do them separately.
Okay, so all in favor? Yes?
We're going to vote for it right now. We've got a motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Against? Thank you. Next one, Steve?
the second invoice that's been presented and reviewed by the subcommittee, we're recommending for approval is the invoice number 16346 from Colliers International in the amount of $6,136.
And you're recommending approval?
I am for owner's representation services.
Owner's been made, motion made and
Seconded.
seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Against?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Next one, Steve?
The next invoice that we're putting up for approval is invoice number 30322 from Special Testing Laboratories for construction material testing in the amount of $1,566. I recommend approval.
Motion's been made, a recommendation motion been made, it's been seconded? You got a second?
Second. You give me a chance?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Against? Thank you. Next, Steve?
The next is invoice number 10 from Shawmut for construction services. It's in the amount of $742,000, sorry, $742,845.47. This is their monthly payment application for work that's been performed on the project up through July 31st. It's been reviewed and approved, as the others have, by Colliers International, as well as DeStefano and Chamberlain, as well as the Finance Subcommittee. We recommend approval of this payment application.
Okay, a motion made, seconded on approval of Shawmut's invoice number 10. Ben, any issues here?
No issues.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Against? Dissension, whatever? Okay, thank you. And then, Steve, do you want to get into these budget transfers and change order requests?
Yes, we have two to discuss tonight. Again, these have been reviewed, and we're putting these forth tonight for approval. The first is from Shawmut. It's change request number 008. It's in the amount of it's a credit of $762. This change request number 8 is the culmination of what was known and we've discussed as ASI number 2, which is a multitude of changes. The pricing has gone back and forth. Shawmut and Colliers have worked hard to get these numbers in line. All the small change work captured in ASI number 2 is now totaled to be a $762 credit to the project. So after our review, the Finance Subcommittee recommends approval of change request number 8.
Recommendation and motion, is
I made a recommendation and a motion, yes, I did.
Any discussion regarding number 008, in the amount of the credit 762? Hearing none, all in favor? Against? Thank you.
And the last item up that the Finance Subcommittee recommends for approval is known as BT 007, which is Budget Transfer 007. It is for Shawmut. It's in the amount of $2,366. This is a budget transfer that would move $2,366 from contingency, out of construction contingency, excuse me, to the glass and glazing line item. It's to repair broken glass as part of the curtain wall. Again, it's a budget transfer, meaning from Shawmut's contingency to a trade contractor line item, which happens to be the glass and glazing contractor on this project. So after review of the supporting documentation, the Finance Subcommittee recommends approval of this budget transfer.
The recommendation, motion been made, second. Discussion. Is this the glass that was stored? And so he's taking it out and installing, or how do we know this?
It was one piece of glass from the existing curtain wall that got damaged when we moved the Connex box that it was all stored in. They came out, measured it, got the exact same glass, exact same color. It was available, and they're going to furnish and install it as if it was part of the project.
Motion made and seconded. There's been some discussion. All in favor? Aye. Against? Thank you.
That's all we have tonight.
You know, just as a public comment, while we've been doing a lot of stuff on site and meeting on site on a regular basis and meeting what we've managed to get down to once a month in this room, the Finance Subcommittee has been going along with Colliers, with Ben, and reviewing all this financial documentation. It's been a terrific help to this committee. Terrific, because we spend 15 minutes on this or 12 minutes on this, and some building committees will throw a whole meeting at it. And thank you. Great level of detail and confidence we have. Public comment? No public comment. New business? We're going to leave that agenda item on for the water fountains for the next meeting, or what are we going to do with that?
Jim, it's not a new business, but I think I'd like to make sure the record commends the police chief. I mean, I pass by the building site every morning on thing like that, and they have a security guy who brings people across the street. So what big concerns was the fact during this construction, someone would get hurt. They've done an excellent job of making sure that people can cross the street, someone's there to stop people and something like that. So I think, for the record, the police chief should be notified some way, ensure that they've done an excellent job. These are auxiliary policemen who do this thing, but nevertheless, they stand out there. It's a hot day. This past weekend, it was hot, and they sit out there for 6 or 7 hours making sure people could cross the street. So people were able to use the facility, you know, the extent of the facility. I think I would make sure that the record reflects the fact I think that they've done an excellent job on behalf of the people of the community.
Thank you. Any new business, old business?
Relative to new business, I don't know if there's a timing issue relative to the elimination of the water fountains. I'll turn that over to Shawmut.
Would you like me to
Yeah.
give you the background on that issue?
Yeah.
Okay. So
You don't mind if I looked at the clock just as you said that?
I'll speak very quickly.
Not too quickly.
When we were designing the project, the request was made by Parks and Rec, you need to have some outdoor showers. So on the drawings that were bid, we have the two ends of the site, an outdoor shower planted in the sand, so to speak. For whatever reason, the plumbing engineer put right next to it a drinking fountain, which I didn't realize that's what it was at the time because it said bubbler, so I thought it was something to wash your feet off with. Yeah, I missed that. So anyway, the plumbing contractor already purchased these drinking fountains. When I reviewed the issue with Jerry Lombardo, Director of Parks and Rec, he said, no, we don't want a drinking fountain right next to the outdoor shower. So I talked with Jeff and tried to see what we could come up with in terms of a credit for just getting rid of them. Again, the plumbing contractor had already purchased them. So the credit that was proposed, I think it's like $2,300 or something, is the credit for them less a restocking fee and less a redelivery fee from the warehouse. But as far as the owner, the user, the Parks and Rec, they do not need drinking fountains on the sand because there are drinking fountains on the building.
Could you take us to that last comment, and that is, do we have adequate drinking fountains around the building?
Yes, the existing bathrooms in the west wing have a, dual height drinking fountain between the men's and women's rooms. Our new bathrooms in the east wing have exactly the same thing. Both of them you access from the decks along the back of the building, which are wheelchair accessible as well as accessible from stairs.
How about just plain drinking fountains going up on the deck, so you don't have to go inside the building, you're on the beach, you're hot, you want to run up
That's
on
what I was referring to. They're under the covered roofs on the
Okay.
decks, but not inside the building. They're,
Okay.
you can walk up there with sandy feet and get a drink of water.
You being down there, the way to do it.
So that was an oversight that we included something we shouldn't have on the drawings, and this is the best credit we could get for it, so it seemed like a prudent fiscal move to just take the credit.
So Steve, you want to take care of it right now, and, okay.
I know.
All right, okay.
There was a little bit, I had a question on some of the supporting
Right.
documentation.
All right, great.
So
we'll
that-
leave
that-
it as a new, the other new business item is, and I know this has been discussed before, and I apologize for it, did we resolve the issue of why there is not a handicap ramp in the rear exit of the locker wing, the back? The Parks and a couple of members of the Parks and Recreation Department have asked that a couple of times. I made a presentation, an update presentation of them recently, and it came up yet again.
Yeah, when we were going through the design of the building at one of the Parks and Recs meetings, one of the commissioners asked, were there two exits from the locker room, and were they both wheelchair accessible? And the answer was, there are two exits. One of them is wheelchair accessible, one of them is a set of stairs. And the reason for that is that that's all the code requires. Now, having said that, things to remember is that all the handicap accessible lockers are at the end of the locker room closest to the wheelchair accessible entrance. And the other thing is, we could add a ramp if we so chose at the other end of the building. But at this point, I don't think it's necessary because we do have a very wide landing outside that door. It is in prominent view of the public and emergency personnel. Should somebody in a wheelchair need to rescue assistance, they can very easily be found and helped.
Any reason for the committee to address this? It's just a question. Was there a ramp there originally?
There was never a ramp in the design for this project. The existing building did have a ramp at that end of the deck that was not part of the original construction. It had been added by the town at some later date and time.
Any reason to pursue this? I mean, turn it back to them and say if they want to request it, we'll consider it, but otherwise it's no?
I assume it's not required.
That's correct. It's the building code and fire codes don't require it.
I think if Parks and Recs wants us to do it, we should probably do it, but that's just my
They haven't
feeling.
asked us. It's just come up as to why it was not there. I think this is the second time it's come up. And
It was a question by one of the commissioners. It was
Yeah.
a fair question, but I think that's the extent of it.
Right. Kevin, could I impose on you to just give me a email reply?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Then I can forward it. Anybody have any?
I have a ramp question. Something I mentioned, I think, 2 years ago. On these very long ramps, I asked if a couple of seating areas can be cut out for people who have trouble walking, because they are pretty long ramps. Is that something that can be done?
Currently, we don't have any room for seating along
Well,
those ramps.
if you're going up along the ramp, if you do a cutout with a bench, is what I'm talking about,
Right.
like a 2-foot bench.
It could be done. There are none on the plans at the moment. Some of the ramps, let me take that back.
Not everybody who's handicapped is in a wheelchair. Some people struggle with a walker, some people struggle without one, and on a very hot day or whatever, they may just want to sit down. It's a long ramp.
Yeah, how, the 80 feet, 100 feet?
No, the longest ramp is the one at the front entrance of the building, and it has an intermediate landing. because of the length of it. You can only go 30 feet at a time with a ramp before you need a landing.
Is that landing bigger than the ramp itself? Or is it just a flat spot on the ramp?
So the ramp itself is 5 feet wide. The landing is essentially 5 by 10. It's enough so you can sweep around and go back up the other leg of the ramp. The other 3 ramps on the building are exactly 30 feet long because it's a 30-inch drop, so there's no landing because you didn't need one. So
So,
I'd be happy to look at it and see what we can integrate.
could you?
Sure.
Is the framing such that it just could be overlapped and the railing could just go out around it and, there was a bench could be...
I
the
need
bench
to
could
look
be-
at it a little closer, but possibly, yeah.
Let me do that. I would put that on a new business so it reappears.
Yes.
That'd be a
we're new
rest area
business.
at the ramps.
Yeah.
Anything, Steve?
I do
Anything
not.
else? Motion adjourned, made, second.
Just one, when's our next meeting?
2 weeks?
Or 1 month?
Our next meeting is in 2 weeks, but the question is, how are we doing as far as needing that particular meeting? The way we've been doing it is we've been waiting, if there's an agenda item, we hold it that first meeting of the 2 meetings. If there's not, we just wait for the second meeting that month.
The normal second meeting in September.
Right. So we leave it on the agenda, we leave our schedule, cancel it in 3 or 4 days. If nobody in the committee brings something forward, I mean, typically, Andy and I poll everybody to find out if there are any particular issues that ought to come up, and we'll cancel a meeting if we don't have any significant agenda item.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. We could go back to, what are we, in our 3rd year? We had a motion made and seconded for adjourn, thank you.
We did.